Have you ever stopped talking to someone you love? Not for an hour, not for a day, but for weeks, for months. Have you let silence become a weapon in your own home? A cold war where no shots are fired, but every moment wounds? Have you ever wondered what happens to a soul that dies carrying that kind of coldness in their heart? In northern Italy, in the winter of 1883, something happened that would change how one of the church's greatest saints understood the hidden dangers of marriage. The city was Turin. The man was Father John Bosco, known throughout Europe as Don Bosco, the priest of the poor, the father of orphans, the miracle worker who had fed hundreds with a single basket of bread, who had raised a boy from the dead, who saw visions that came true with terrifying accuracy. By 1883, Don Bosco was 68 years old. He had been a priest for 42 years. He had heard tens of thousands of confessions. He had counseled widows, orphans, married couples, young lovers, old enemies. He thought he had seen every kind of sin. He thought he understood every kind of suffering. He was wrong. On the evening of February 23rd, 1883, just as evening prayers were ending at the oratory of St. Francis de Sales, a woman arrived at the gate. She was soaked from snow. Her cloak was thin. Her face was pale. She asked to see Don Bosco immediately. The porter, a young Salesian named Brother Giacomo, told her that Don Bosco was exhausted and could not receive visitors. She did not move. She stood in the snow and said, "Tell him a soul is in danger. Tell him I need to know where my husband is." Brother Giacomo looked at her face and went to find Don Bosco. The woman's name was recorded in the oratory registers as Maria Vittoria Rossetti. She was 42 years old, born in the village of Chieri, 15 kilometers south of Turin, married at 23, mother of one daughter, widow for 3 weeks. She had walked for 3 hours through February snow to reach the oratory. Her hands were shaking, not from the cold, from fear. Don Bosco received her in his small room on the second floor of the oratory. The room measured 4 meters by 3 meters. There was a wooden desk, a single chair, a crucifix on the wall, a window that looked out onto the courtyard where hundreds of boys played each day. The room smelled of candle wax and old books. Don Bosco sat at his desk. Maria Vittoria stood. She looked at the floor. She asked to speak with him alone. Father Giovanni Bonetti, Don Bosco's secretary and one of his closest collaborators for over 20 years, was in the room. Don Bosco nodded to him. Bonetti left. Years later, in his journal, Bonetti would write that he heard Maria Vittoria weeping through the door. He heard Don Bosco's voice, soft and low. He heard her confess something that made him understand why Don Bosco would tell this story for the rest of his life. Maria Vittoria looked at Don Bosco and said 4 words that would haunt him until his death 5 years later. "Father, my husband died." Don Bosco waited. He had heard these words thousands of times. Death was everywhere in Turin in 1883. Tuberculosis, typhoid, industrial accidents. He waited for her to continue. She took a breath and said the rest. We had not spoken in 11 months. 11 months. 336 days. Not a single word exchanged between husband and wife. They lived in the same house on Via San Donato, a narrow street in the working district of Turin. They ate at the same table, a small wooden table that had belonged to Giuseppe's father, a carpenter who had died in the cholera outbreak of 1854. They slept in rooms separated by a single wall, but between them, nothing. Just silence. Cold, heavy, deadly. Don Bosco's face changed. Bonetti, listening through the door, heard the tone shift. This was not like the other confessions. This was something else, something darker. Don Bosco leaned forward. "Tell me everything," he said, "from the beginning." Maria Vittoria told Don Bosco the story, every detail, every moment, every choice that led to 11 months of silence. It started on April 7th, 1882, a Thursday evening. Giuseppe Rossetti came home from the railway yards where he worked 12 hours a day as a metal worker. He was 39 years old, strong hands, scarred from burns. He earned 1 lira and 20 centesimi per day. It was enough to rent the house, enough to buy food, barely enough. That evening, Maria Vittoria had prepared polenta with a small piece of dried cod. It was what they ate most nights. Giuseppe sat down. He tasted it, and he said, "This is too salty." Just 4 words. Not shouted, not cruel, just stated. A fact. Maria Vittoria, who had been cooking for 19 years of marriage, who had stretched every centesimo to feed her family, who was exhausted from washing clothes for 3 other families to earn extra money, responded with a sharp word. "Then cook it yourself." Giuseppe looked up. His face hardened. "What did you say?" Maria Vittoria felt something rise in her chest. Pride, hurt, anger at being criticized after a long day. "I said, cook it yourself. I'm tired of trying to please you." Giuseppe stood up. He raised his voice, not loud, but firm, cold. "You will not speak to me that way." Maria Vittoria turned her back. "Then do not criticize me." Giuseppe left the table. He went to his room. He did not eat. and Maria Vittoria did not call him back. That night they did not speak. She assumed he would apologize in the morning. He assumed she would apologize in the morning. Morning came, neither spoke. He left for work. She began her chores. Their daughter, 12-year-old Anna, asked, "Mama, why is Papa angry?" Maria Vittoria said, "He is not angry. He is proud." 1 day passed. Giuseppe and Maria Vittoria moved around each other like strangers. Then 2 days, then 3. On the 4th day, Anna tried to make them talk. She said at dinner, "Mama made your favorite bread, Papa." Giuseppe looked at the bread. He ate it. He said nothing. Maria Vittoria watched him eat. She said nothing. Anna started to cry. By the end of the first week, the silence had become a pattern, a routine. Giuseppe would leave before sunrise for the railway yards. Maria Vittoria would prepare his lunch, wrapped in cloth, and leave it by the door. He would take it without acknowledgement. She would clean the house, care for Anna, wash clothes for other families. When Giuseppe returned in the evening, she would have dinner ready. He would eat. She would sit at the table. Neither would look at each other. 1 month passed, then 2, then 3. The silence was no longer awkward. It was normal, expected, a way of life. They communicated through their daughter. "Tell your father dinner is ready. Ask your mother where my coat is." Anna, at 12 years old, became a messenger between 2 adults who shared a bed that had become as cold as a tomb. Anna cried at night. They both knew. Maria Vittoria heard her through the thin walls. Giuseppe heard her too, but neither of them broke the silence, because breaking the silence meant admitting fault, and admitting fault meant losing, and neither of them could bear to lose. In July, Maria Vittoria's sister visited from Chieri. She noticed immediately. "You are not speaking to Giuseppe?" Maria Vittoria said, "He's not speaking to me." Her sister said, "Then you speak first?" Maria Vittoria said, "Why should I? I did nothing wrong." Her sister said, "Is that more important than your marriage?" Maria Vittoria did not answer. Her sister left. They never discussed it again. In September, Giuseppe's brother came to visit. He worked at the same railway yards. He asked Giuseppe, "Why is your house so quiet?" Giuseppe said, "Because there is nothing to say." His brother said, "That is pride talking." Giuseppe said, "No, that is dignity." His brother said, "Dignity will not keep you warm at night." Giuseppe said, "Neither will a woman who does not respect me." Alms. By November, the house on Via San Donato had become a place of ghosts. 3 people living together but utterly alone. Anna stopped trying to make them talk. She accepted the silence as permanent. She learned to communicate in whispers and gestures. She learned that love could exist and die in the same house. December came, then January, then February. 11 months of silence. Winter in Turin was harsh that year. The temperature dropped below freezing for 18 consecutive days in February 1883. The streets were covered in ice. The poor burned whatever they could find to stay warm. On February 15th, Giuseppe came home from work, shivering. He had been outside for 12 hours. The railway yards were brutal in winter. Metal burned the hands. Wind cut through clothes. He sat by the small fire in the main room. Maria Vittoria saw him shivering. She brought a blanket. She placed it on the chair next to him. She did not hand it to him. She did not want to get too close. She did not want him to think she was apologizing. Giuseppe took the blanket. He wrapped it around himself. He did not say thank you. She walked away. That night, Giuseppe developed a fever. He lay in his bed, shaking. Anna knocked on Maria Vittoria's door. "Mama, Papa is sick." Maria Vittoria went to his room. She touched his forehead. It was burning. She brought cold water. She placed it by his bed. She did not speak. He did not speak. She left. The fever lasted 4 days. 4 terrible days where Giuseppe lay alone in his room, burning and freezing, and Maria Vittoria moved through the house like a shadow, preparing soup, bringing water, changing the cloth on his forehead, but never speaking, never asking, never comforting, because speaking would mean breaking 11 months of pride, and she could not do it, and he could not do it either. On the 4th day, February 19th, Giuseppe tried to get out of bed. He wanted water. The pitcher by his bed was empty. He stood. His legs gave out. He fell. Anna heard the sound. She ran to his room. She screamed. Maria Vittoria came running. Giuseppe was on the floor. His eyes were open. He was conscious. He looked at Maria Vittoria. For the first time in 11 months, he looked directly at her. She knelt beside him. She lifted his head. She wanted to say something, anything. "I am sorry. I love you. Please do not leave me." But the words would not come. 11 months of silence had built a wall in her throat. She opened her mouth. Nothing. Giuseppe looked at her. He tried to speak. His lips moved. No sound came out. He was too weak. She helped him back to bed. She brought water. He drank, and then he closed his eyes, and he never opened them again. Giuseppe Rossetti died on February 20th, 1883 at 4 in the afternoon. He was 39 years old. He died with his wife sitting next to his bed. He died without hearing her voice. He died without telling her he was sorry. He died with 11 months of silence sitting on his chest like a stone. And now, 3 days after the burial, Maria Vittoria stood in front of Don Bosco, shaking, asking the question that had consumed her for 3 weeks. 3 weeks of nightmares. 3 weeks of guilt. 3 weeks of replaying that final moment when Giuseppe looked at her and she could not speak. "Father," she said, her voice breaking, "where is his soul? Is he in hell? Did God punish him for his pride? Did I send him there?" "Oh." Don Bosco closed his eyes. He did what he often did when someone asked about the dead. He prayed. He folded his hands. He lowered his head. He asked God for clarity. He asked for truth. He asked for mercy. The room became very quiet. Maria Vittoria watched him. She could hear her own heartbeat. And then, according to the testimony of Father Giovanni Bonetti, who wrote about this evening in his journal on February 24th, 1883, preserved now in the Salesian Historical Archives in Turin, something happened that Don Bosco himself would later describe in a letter to Archbishop Lorenzo Gastaldi of Turin, dated March 2nd, 1883. Don Bosco saw something, not with his physical eyes, with his spiritual sight, the gift God had given him since he was 9 years old, the gift that allowed him to see souls, to see their state, to see their suffering, to see what others could not see. He saw Giuseppe, not his body, his soul, standing in a place that was neither earth nor heaven, a place of fire, not the eternal fire of hell, not the flames of damnation, but the purifying fire of purgatory, the fire that burns away the stains of sin, the fire that prepares the soul for heaven, the fire that hurts but does not destroy, the fire that cleanses but does not consume. Giuseppe was alone. He was surrounded by flames that rose from the ground, but the flames were not touching him from the outside. They were coming from the inside, from his chest, from his throat, from the place where words should have been, where love should have been spoken, and where forgiveness should have been offered. The fire was burning in the space where silence had lived for 11 months. Don Bosco saw Giuseppe counting, moving his lips, silently counting days. 1, 2, 3, 10, 50, 100, 300. Giuseppe's soul was paying. Every day of silence was being burned away. Every moment of pride was being purified. Every refusal to speak, every refusal to apologize, every refusal to forgive was turning into fire. And Giuseppe would remain there until the debt was paid, until every single day of silence had been accounted for. Don Bosco opened his eyes. He was breathing heavily. His face was wet with tears. Maria Vittoria saw his expression and her stomach dropped. She thought, "He is in hell. I killed him. My pride killed him." But Don Bosco spoke first. He looked at Maria Vittoria with an expression she would never forget. Not anger, not pity, something worse. Sorrow. Deep, immovable sorrow. The sorrow of seeing something terrible and knowing it could have been prevented. "Your husband is not in hell," he said softly. Maria Vittoria gasped. Relief flooded through her body. She almost collapsed. She reached for the chair. Don Bosco continued, "But he is not in heaven either. He is in purgatory, in the fire that purifies, in the place where souls pay for the sins they did not repent in life. Purgatory, the place between heaven and hell, the place where souls are purified, the place where debts are paid, the place where mercy meets justice." Maria Vittoria's hands were shaking. "How long?" she whispered. "How long will he be there?" Don Bosco was silent for a moment. He looked at her, and then he spoke words that would be recorded in Father Bonetti's journal, words that would be quoted in sermons throughout Italy for decades, words that would change how thousands of couples understood the consequences of their daily choices. "Every day of silence you shared in life," Don Bosco said, "will be paid for in fire. Every word you refuse to speak, every apology you refuse to give, every moment of forgiveness you refuse to offer, all of it is being burned away now, and it will continue to burn until the debt is paid." Maria Vittoria did the calculation immediately. 11 months, 30 days in April after the argument began, 31 in May, 30 in June, 31 in July, 31 in August, 30 in September, 31 in October, 30 in November, 31 in December, 31 in January, 19 days in February until Giuseppe died. 336 days. 336 days of silence. 336 days where love should have been spoken and was not. 336 days, Maria Vittoria whispered. "He will suffer for 336 days?" Her voice was hollow, broken. Don Bosco shook his head. "No, that is how long you were silent. His time in purgatory may be longer, because his pride was his own. His refusal to forgive was his own. His silence was his own choice. He will pay for his share of the sin. But you," Don Bosco leaned forward, "you are still alive. You still have time. You can help him." Maria Vittoria looked up. "How? What can I do? He is dead. I cannot speak to him. I cannot apologize. It is too late." Don Bosco's face softened. It is never too late to speak. Not while you are alive. Not while God is listening. But Don Bosco saw something else. Something worse. He saw that Maria Vittoria's soul was in danger too, because she was still alive, and she was still silent, not with her voice, but with her heart. She had not forgiven her husband even after his death. She carried the coldness with her like a stone around her neck. She blamed him. She justified herself. She told herself, I did nothing wrong. He started it. He should have apologized first. You must speak now, Don Bosco told her. His voice was firm, urgent. You must break the silence. Maria Vittoria looked confused. But he is dead, she said. Don Bosco leaned forward. Then speak to God. Confess your pride. Beg for mercy. Offer masses for his soul. Pray the rosary. Do penance. Fast. Give alms. Speak his name in prayer. You have the chance your husband did not have. He's locked in fire, paying for what he refused to do in life. But you are here. You are alive. You can still choose differently. Use your time. Do not waste it. Maria Vittoria wept. She fell to her knees. And right there, in Don Bosco's small room at the oratory, she made her confession. She admitted everything. The pride, the stubbornness, the refusal to be the first to apologize, the weeks of cold punishment disguised as silence, the satisfaction she felt when Giuseppe looked hurt, the way she had convinced herself she was the victim when, in truth, she had been just as guilty. Don Bosco gave her absolution, and then he gave her a penance unlike any he had given before. For the next 11 months, he said, you will speak to your husband every single day. You will speak out loud. You will tell him you're sorry. You will tell him you forgive him. You will offer each word as a prayer for his soul. You will do this until the silence is broken, not just between you and him, but between your soul and God. Maria Vittoria returned home that night. And the next morning, she began. She stood in the kitchen where she and Giuseppe had stopped speaking, and she said out loud, Giuseppe, I am sorry. I forgive you. I ask you to forgive me. Her daughter heard her. At first, she thought her mother had lost her mind, but Maria Vittoria explained, I am speaking to your father, and I will speak to him every day until God tells me to stop. Yes. For 11 months, she did exactly what Don Bosco instructed. She spoke to Giuseppe every morning. She attended Mass every Sunday and offered it for his soul. She prayed the rosary every evening, each beat a word she had refused to speak when he was alive. She fasted on Fridays. She gave to the poor in his name. And then, on a cold morning in January of 1884, exactly 11 months after she began, Maria Vittoria had a dream. She saw Giuseppe. He was standing in a bright place. He was smiling. He looked at her and said, Thank you. And then he was gone. Maria Vittoria woke up with a feeling she had not experienced in 2 years. Peace. She returned to Don Bosco and told him about the dream. He nodded slowly and said, Your husband has been released. The debt has been paid. The silence has been broken. But this story did not end there. Don Bosco told this story many times in the years that followed. He told it to married couples who came to him for counsel. He told it to young men and women preparing for marriage. He told it to priests who heard confessions. He wanted them to understand something that most people do not realize until it is too late. Silence is not peace. Silence is not strength. Silence, when used as a weapon, is a sin. In 1886, Don Bosco wrote a letter to a young couple who were engaged to be married. The letter is preserved in the Salesian archives. In it, he wrote these words, Never let the sun set on your anger. Never allow silence to replace love. If you are wrong, apologize immediately. If you are right, forgive immediately. Pride is the enemy of marriage. Humility is its foundation. He went further. He explained that in marriage there are two kinds of silence. There is the silence of peace, when two souls rest together in the presence of God. And there is the silence of war, when two souls punish each other by withholding the one thing the other needs most, love. The first silence is holy. The second silence is deadly. Don Bosco saw many things in his life. He saw visions of heaven. He saw visions of hell. He saw visions of purgatory. He saw the souls of children who had died. He saw the souls of saints who had lived. But one of the most haunting things he ever saw was the soul of Giuseppe, standing in fire, counting days, waiting for his wife to say the words he needed to hear. I forgive you. I am sorry. Maria Vittoria lived for 30 more years after her husband died. She never remarried. She dedicated her life to helping other women who were struggling in their marriages. She became known in Turin as the woman who broke the silence. When couples came to her for advice, she told them the same thing every time. Do not wait. Do not let pride win. Speak while you still can. In 1913, Maria Vittoria died at the age of 72. According to the testimony of the priest who attended her deathbed, Father Antonio Candela, her last words were these, Thank God I spoke. The lesson Don Bosco taught through this story is simple but brutal. Every sin we commit in this life has consequences in the next. Every moment of pride, every act of cruelty, every refusal to love when love is possible will be weighed. And the soul that dies in a state of unforgiveness, even if it is saved from hell, will suffer until the debt is paid. But there is also mercy. Enormous, overwhelming mercy. Maria Vittoria's husband was not in hell. He was in purgatory. And that meant he could still be helped. That meant prayers still mattered. That meant the silence could still be broken. Don Bosco spent 50 years of his life hearing confessions. He heard the sins of thousands of people. And he said that one of the most common sins he encountered among married couples was the sin of silence. Not the silence of prayer, not the silence of rest, but the silence of punishment, the silence of pride, the silence that says, I will make you suffer by withholding myself from you. He saw couples who had not spoken in days. He saw couples who had not spoken in weeks. He saw couples who had not spoken in months, and he told them all the same thing. You are not punishing each other, you are punishing yourselves, and if you die in this state, you will continue to suffer long after death. In 1887, 1 year before Don Bosco died, he gave a retreat to married couples in Milan. There were 43 couples present. Don Bosco asked them a question. How many of you are currently not speaking to your spouse? 8 hands went up. 8 out of 43, nearly 1 in 5. Don Bosco looked at them and said, You are standing at the edge of a cliff, and you do not even know it. He then told the story of Maria Vittoria and Giuseppe. When he finished, all 8 couples went to confession that same evening. And, according to Father Michel Rua, who was present, all 8 couples reconciled before they left the retreat. One of those couples, a man named Carlo and his wife Anna, wrote to Don Bosco 6 months later. They thanked him. They said that they had been silent for 3 months before the retreat. They said that they had convinced themselves the silence did not matter. They said that hearing the story of Giuseppe saved their marriage. They wrote, We did not want to die the way he died. We did not want to spend eternity paying for our pride. Don Bosco kept that letter in his desk until the day he died. When his room was cleaned after his death in 1888, the letter was found, folded carefully next to his rosary. On the back of the letter, in Don Bosco's handwriting, were these words, Every marriage saved is a soul saved. Every word spoken in love is a prayer heard in heaven. This is the truth Don Bosco saw and taught for 50 years of priestly ministry. Marriage is not just a contract between 2 people. It is not just a legal agreement or a romantic partnership. It is a covenant before God, a sacred bond witnessed by heaven, and every word matters. Every silence matters. Every act of love or refusal to love is recorded in the books of eternity. Nothing is forgotten. Nothing disappears. Every moment of pride, every moment of coldness, every refusal to speak when speaking was possible, all of it accumulates. All of it weighs on the soul. All of it will be accounted for. The Church teaches that purgatory is a place of mercy, a gift of God's compassion. Because the soul that dies with unforgiven venial sins, with unpaid debts, with unhealed wounds, cannot enter heaven in that state. Heaven is perfect. Heaven is pure. And nothing impure can enter there. So God, in his infinite mercy, provides purgatory, a place of cleansing, a place of healing, a place where the soul can be made ready for heaven. But purgatory is also a place of suffering, real suffering. Not eternal suffering like hell, but temporary suffering that can last years, decades, even centuries, depending on the weight of sin carried. The fire of purgatory is not metaphorical. It is real, not physical fire like on earth, but spiritual fire that burns away the imperfections of the soul. And for Giuseppe, those imperfections were 336 days of silence, 336 days of pride, 336 days of refusing to love when love was needed most. In 1929, 41 years after Don Bosco's death, a woman named Teresa visited the Basilica of Mary Help of Christians in Turin. She was 80 years old. She asked to speak to one of the Salesian priests. She told him a story. When she was 23, she had attended Don Bosco's retreat for married couples in Milan in 1887. She was one of the 8 people who had raised her hand. She and her husband had not spoken in 2 months. Teresa said, I will never forget what Don Bosco told me that day in confession. He said, Your husband is not your enemy. Your pride is your enemy. Kill it before it kills you. I walked out of that confessional, and I went straight to my husband, and I said 3 words, I'm sorry. And he said 3 words back, I forgive you. And we never stopped talking again. Teresa's husband had died 15 years earlier. She said, when he died, I was holding his hand, and the last thing he said to me was, thank you for speaking. I knew exactly what he meant. He meant, thank you for not letting silence win. Don Bosco understood something that most people do not understand until it is too late. Love is not a feeling. Love is a choice. And that choice must be made every single day. Sometimes every single hour. Sometimes every single minute. The choice to speak when silence would be easier. The choice to forgive when holding a grudge would feel better. The choice to humble yourself when pride is screaming at you to stand your ground. And the souls who refuse to make that choice, who die clutching their pride like a treasure, will pay for it. Not in hell if they are fortunate, but in purgatory, in fire, in loneliness, in regret, counting days, waiting for someone to pray, waiting for someone to speak the words they refused to speak in life. Maria Vittoria spoke, and her husband was saved. But she almost did not. She almost let pride win. She almost walked away from Don Bosco's room without confessing. She almost decided that her husband deserved to suffer. And if she had made that choice, she would have joined him in purgatory when she died. Because the soul that refuses to forgive cannot enter heaven. This is not a story about hell. This is a story about mercy. This is a story about second chances. This is a story about the fact that even after death, even after months of silence, even after a lifetime of mistakes, it is still possible to make things right. But only if someone is willing to speak. Only if someone is willing to break the silence. Only if someone is willing to say, I was wrong. I'm sorry. I forgive you. Don Bosco died on January 31st, 1888. He was 72 years old. He had spent his entire life working with children, building schools, founding religious orders, hearing confessions, performing miracles. But one of the last things he said before he died, according to Father Rua, was this: I wish I had spent more time teaching married couples how to love each other. So many souls are lost because they do not know how to forgive. He was not talking about people who commit terrible crimes. He was not talking about violence or betrayal or abandonment. He was talking about the small sins, the everyday sins, the sins of silence, the sins of pride, the sins of withholding love when love is the only thing that can save us. Giuseppe died without speaking to his wife. He was saved from hell, but he spent months in fire because he refused to say 2 words. I'm sorry. Maria Vittoria almost made the same mistake, but she chose differently. She chose to speak. She chose to forgive. She chose to break the silence, and in doing so, she saved not only her husband's soul, but her own. This is the lesson Don Bosco left for us. Do not wait. Do not let pride win. Do not assume you have time. Death comes suddenly. And when it comes, it does not care about who was right or who was wrong. It only cares about the state of your soul. And if your soul is cold, if your soul is silent, if your soul is wrapped in unforgiveness, you will suffer. Not forever, if you are fortunate, but long enough. Speak now. Forgive now. Apologize now, while you still can. While the person you love is still alive. While the silence has not yet hardened into stone. Because the moment death arrives, your chance is over, and the words you refuse to say in life will become the debt you pay in death. Don Bosco saw this. He warned about it. He begged people to listen. Most did not, but some did. Maria Vittoria did. And her husband was released from fire because she was willing to do what he could not. She was willing to speak. She was willing to break 11 months of silence with 11 months of prayer. She was willing to say out loud every single day, I'm sorry. I forgive you. And God heard her, and Giuseppe was freed. And the silence was finally, mercifully, beautifully broken. The last documented mention of Maria Vittoria appears in a registry from the Basilica of Mary Help of Christians. The entry is dated November 9th, 1913. It records her death and her burial. And next to her name, someone, probably one of the Salesian priests who knew her story, wrote 3 words in Latin, Silentium fracta est. The silence is broken.